The orphan girl fled to the abandoned train, but what she found changed her life. Emma Harrison ran through the cold New York dawn, her little legs shaking with exhaustion and fear. At 10 years old, she had made the hardest decision of her life by fleeing the municipal children's home Our Lady of Hope, where she had lived for 5 years. The news that she would be transferred to a stricter institution upstate had been the trigger for her desperate escape. The girl followed the abandoned tracks of the old railroad that cut through the city's outskirts, her bare feet stepping on the cold stones. When she spotted the rusted train cars covered in moss and vegetation, she knew she had found her temporary refuge. Upon entering the third car, she stumbled on a loose floorboard. Curious, she lifted the wood and found an old leather suitcase hidden underneath. When she opened it, her eyes filled with tears. Inside were family jewels, yellowed photographs and letters addressed with her own name. Emma sat on the cold floor of the car, her hands trembling as she held a faded photograph. The image showed an elegant woman with long dark hair, holding a baby in her arms. On the back, an inscription in delicate handwriting said, "To my daughter Emma, with eternal love, Mama Elizabeth." The girl recognized her own features in the woman's face in the photo. The same brown eyes, the same nose shape, the same dimple in the chin. There were other photographs in the suitcase. One showed the same woman in front of a large 2-story house with a flower garden in front. Another depicted a children's party, with a decorated table and a cake with 2 little candles, where the woman held a small child who was clearly Emma. The images told a story completely different from what she had always believed about her life. Among the objects was also a gold necklace with a heart-shaped pendant, engraved with the initials E.H., exactly her initials, Emma Harrison. But how did those things get there? Why were they hidden in an abandoned train? And who was that woman who seemed to love her so much in the photographs? At the bottom of the suitcase, she found a sealed envelope with her name written in capital letters. Inside was a birth certificate that completely contradicted everything she knew about herself. According to the document, she had not been born in the public hospital, as she had always been told, but in a private maternity center in the city center. The mother's name was clearly written, Elizabeth Rose Harrison. The letters were even more revealing. One of them, dated 6 years ago, said, "My dear daughter, Mommy is trying everything to get you back. The bad men took you from me, but I will find a way to prove you are mine. This suitcase is our security, our proof. One day you will understand why Mommy had to hide these things. I love you more than anything in the world." Emma felt her heart race. She was not an orphan, as she had always believed. She had a mother who was looking for her, who loved her, who had fought for her. But where was this woman now? Why was she in the children's home if she had family? The questions multiplied in her mind as she carefully examined each item in the suitcase. A noise from outside made her quickly hide the suitcase again and crouch behind a row of broken seats. It was Mr. Walter, the maintenance worker from the children's home, who had gone out to look for her. The 50-year-old man entered the car with a flashlight, calling her name softly. "Emma, child, I know you're there. Come on, let's go back to the home. It's cold out here and you could catch pneumonia." The girl remained hidden, clutching the photographs to her chest. She wasn't going back, not after discovering that she might have a real family somewhere. Mr. Walter continued searching for a few minutes before approaching exactly where she was. "Look, Emma, I understand you don't want to go to Albany. No one wants to leave here, especially for a correctional home. But sometimes," he hesitated, running his hand through his graying hair, "sometimes children have complicated histories that are better left alone, you understand? It's for your protection." That phrase made Emma lift her head. Complicated histories. Protection. Did Mr. Walter know something about her past? The girl could tell by his nervous way of speaking that information was being hidden from her. When he moved away to check another train car, she took the opportunity to escape silently through the back door. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out now continuing. Emma ran through the early morning carrying only the most important photographs in the pocket of her torn blouse. She needed to find the house that appeared in the pictures. She needed to discover what had happened to her mother. The deserted streets of the outskirts gradually gave way to the more central neighborhoods of the city, and she oriented herself by the landmarks she recognized from the few times she had left the children's home. The address was written on the back of one of the photographs, 247 Azalea Street, Greenwich Village. Emma knew the neighborhood by name. She knew it was an area of old, well-kept houses. When she reached the street, still in the dark of the early morning, she found the exact house from the photograph. But something was very wrong. The two-story house that looked so cozy and well-kept in the pictures was now abandoned, with boards nailed over the windows and a large "Sold" painted in red on the gate. The flower garden had turned into a vacant lot, full of tall weeds and accumulated trash. It was as if life had been sucked out of that place. Emma cautiously approached the rusty gate. A smaller sign, almost illegible due to time and rain, indicated that the property would be demolished next week for the construction of a residential building. Her heart tightened at the thought that all the memories of that place would be erased forever. "Child, what are you doing there alone at this hour?" The voice startled Emma, who turned quickly to find an elderly lady with white hair and a floral robe watching her from the house next door. The woman must have been about 70 and was holding a steaming cup of coffee in her hands. "Sorry, ma'am, I was just looking." Emma hid the photographs behind her back, not knowing if she could trust the stranger. The lady descended the 3 steps from her porch and approached the gate, studying the girl's face carefully. Suddenly, her expression changed completely, as if she had seen a ghost. "My goodness, you look exactly like her." The woman almost dropped her coffee cup, her hands visibly trembling. Exactly like Elizabeth. Emma's heart raced upon hearing her mother's name. "You know Elizabeth?" "Knew her, my dear. She lived in this house until about 6 years ago. She was my neighbor and my friend." The lady opened the gate of her own house and gestured for Emma to come in. "Come inside, it's cold, and tell me who you are, because the resemblance can't be a coincidence." Inside the simple but cozy house, Emma sat in a crocheted armchair, while the lady, who introduced herself as Mrs. Margaret, prepared hot milk for her. The living room walls were full of old photographs and well-tended plants. "Elizabeth Rose Harrison," said Mrs. Margaret, returning with 2 cups. "A wonderful woman, full of life. She worked as a teacher at a private school and loved that house. But when her little girl disappeared..." "Disappeared?" Emma nearly spilled the hot milk. "What happened?" "It was a very strange thing. One day Elizabeth was caring for her daughter normally, playing in the garden happy as can be. The next day she came to me desperate, saying that men had gone to her house claiming the child was being neglected. They took the girl, and Elizabeth was never the same again." Mrs. Margaret took a handkerchief from her pocket and wiped her eyes. "She fought, you know. She chased after a lawyer, went to family court, made a scene. But the papers said she had abandoned her daughter and that the child was better off in the home. Elizabeth knew it was a lie, but no one believed her." "And then?" Emma asked, her voice almost a whisper. "Then she started getting strange, you know. She talked to herself, didn't sleep, didn't eat properly. One day she showed up here saying she was going to discover the truth, that she had proof hidden away. That was the last time I saw her. The house was mortgaged, she lost everything, and vanished." Emma took the photographs from her pocket with trembling hands. Mrs. Margaret looked at the images and began to cry openly. "My God, where did you find these? Elizabeth showed me some of these photos. You're her daughter, aren't you? You're the little Emma who disappeared." The confirmation Emma had so longed for hit her like a punch in the stomach. She really did have a mother who loved her, who fought for her, who never abandoned her. But where was Elizabeth now? What had happened to her? "Mrs. Margaret, do you know who the men were who took me from my home?" The elderly woman shook her head no. "Elizabeth said they were from Child Protective Services, but I always thought it was strange. She was an exemplary mother. I never saw her mistreat you or neglect anything. You were the apple of her eye." "I need to get into that house," Emma said with determination. "I need to find more clues about what happened. My dear, the house is going to be demolished on Monday. Today is Saturday, so you have 2 days. But it's all sealed up. How will you get in? Emma looked at the abandoned house through Mrs. Margaret's window. It was all closed up indeed, but maybe there was a way. She had spent 5 years in the home, learning to be creative, to get the things she needed. Is there a way to get to the backyard? There's a small gate in the back that leads to the alley. In the old days, Elizabeth always left it open so I could water the plants when she travelled. I don't know if it still opens, but... Mrs. Margaret hesitated, looking at the girl with concern. Emma, wouldn't it be better to go to the authorities? Tell them what you've found. The same authorities who separated me from my mother. The girl shook her head vigorously. No! I need to find the truth on my own first. I need to understand what really happened. The elderly woman sighed, clearly torn between helping and protecting the girl. Look, if you're determined to do this, at least let me help. I have some tools from my late husband that might be useful. And you can't go wandering the streets. Stay here with me until you sort this out. Emma felt a wave of gratitude for Mrs. Margaret's kindness, but she knew she couldn't put the woman at risk. Thank you, but I need to do this alone. If they find out you helped me... Nonsense. You're a 10-year-old child. I won't let you face this alone. Mrs. Margaret stood up with determination. Let's wait for dark, and then we'll figure out a way to get into that house. The hours dragged by slowly. Mrs. Margaret prepared a simple lunch and lent Emma some clean clothes, who took a hot shower, the first in a long time. As they ate, the woman told more details about Elizabeth's life in the house. Your mother loved to cook. Every Sunday she made chocolate cake and brought a piece to me. You were just a tiny thing, maybe about 4 years old, but you already helped her in the kitchen. You'd stand on a high chair stirring the batter. Emma tried to remember, but her memories from her early years were fragmented and confused. She remembered sensations more than specific images, the smell of cake baking, a woman's voice humming softly, loving arms rocking her. Where did Elizabeth work? At St. Catherine's School downtown. She had been a preschool teacher for over 10 years. The children adored her. Mrs. Margaret sighed. After you disappeared, she lost her job too. They said she was emotionally unstable to work with children. The more Emma heard, the more outraged she became. Her mother had lost everything, her daughter, her home, her job, the life she had built. And all because of a lie, an injustice that no one had properly questioned. As the sun began to set, Mrs. Margaret went to fetch a toolbox belonging to her late husband. Among the screwdrivers, hammers and pliers, she found a small pry bar that might be useful. Remember, Emma, if anyone shows up, you run. Don't try to explain anything. Just get out of there as fast as you can. And if you find anything important, keep it safe. It might be the only chance to discover what really happened. The two slipped out silently through the back door and went around the block until they reached the alley behind Elizabeth's house. The small wooden gate was faded and peeling, but it didn't seem to have any special lock. Mrs. Margaret pushed the gate, which opened with a loud, frightening creak. The backyard was overgrown with weeds, with a few fruit trees that continued to bear fruit without any care. Amid the wild vegetation, it was possible to see the remains of what was once a well-kept garden. The house seemed even more haunted up close. The boards covering the windows were dark with moisture, and some roof tiles had fallen, leaving holes in the roof. Emma felt a pang in her heart, imagining how difficult it must have been for her mother to watch the house slowly deteriorate. The back door is here. Mrs. Margaret indicated a small entrance that led directly to the kitchen. Let's see if we can get it open. The lock was rusty, but after a few minutes of effort with the pry bar, they managed to force the door open. The smell of mold and dampness that came from inside the house was almost unbearable. Mrs. Margaret turned on a small flashlight, and the two entered cautiously. The kitchen was completely empty, without any furniture or utensils. Marks on the floor showed where the refrigerator, stove and table had been. On the walls, there were still some hooks where dish towels and utensils probably hung. They took everything when they foreclosed on the house, Mrs. Margaret explained in a low voice. Elizabeth told me the creditors didn't even give her time to sort out her personal things. They passed through the equally empty living room, with rectangular marks on the floor where the furniture had been. The staircase leading to the second floor was covered in dust and some boards seemed loose. Emma climbed carefully, testing each step before putting her full weight on it. The upper floor had 3 bedrooms and a bathroom. The largest one had clearly been Elizabeth's room. You could see where the bed had been by the shape of the marks on the floor. But it was the smaller room that made Emma's heart race. The walls were covered in wallpaper with drawings of butterflies and flowers, clearly a child's room. On the floor were marks from a small bed, a desk, and several toys. It was her old room, preserved exactly as she had left it. "My God," whispered Mrs. Margaret. "Elizabeth kept your room intact until the end." Emma knelt on the spot where her bed had been and ran her hands over the dusty floor. Suddenly, she felt a loose floorboard under her fingers. Carefully, she managed to lift a section of the floor and discovered a small hidden compartment. Inside was a plastic bag with more photographs, some children's drawings, and a small notebook. Emma opened the notebook with trembling hands and recognized the same handwriting from the letters found in the suitcase. It was her mother's diary. March 15th. Today Emma asked me why she doesn't have a father like the other children. I explained that Daddy left when she was a baby, but that we have each other, and that's what matters. She drew our family, just the 2 of us, but with giant hearts around us. April 22nd. The school praised Emma again. She is reading very well for a 4-year-old. I am so proud of her. Sometimes I wonder if I'm doing everything right, raising a daughter alone, but when I see her smile, I know love is enough. June 3rd. Emma woke up crying today, said she dreamed that bad men were taking her away from me. I promised I would never let that happen. We are a family and no one will separate us. Emma felt tears streaming down her face as she read her mother's words of love. Each diary entry showed a woman completely devoted to her daughter, concerned for her well-being and development. Nothing there indicated neglect or abandonment. She continued reading, and the entries became more concerning. September 10th. A strange man appeared at the school today, asking about Emma. He said he was from Child Protective Services, but something didn't seem right. He didn't have proper credentials and asked very specific questions about our home routine. September 15th. The same man passed in front of our house today. I'm sure it was him. Emma was playing in the garden and he watched for several minutes. I called her inside and locked all the doors. September 18th. I received an anonymous letter saying I must cooperate if I want to keep my daughter. I don't understand what this means. I spoke to the school principal and she said she doesn't know any man matching the description I gave. September 20th. Today I found out what they want. That man appeared at my door with 2 others, all in suits. They said they represent a company interested in my house and that it would be better for me and for Emma if I agreed to sell quickly. Emma stopped reading, her blood running cold. Her mother was being threatened because of the house. Someone wanted to force her to sell the property and was using her as leverage. September 25th. They increased the pressure. They said if I don't sell, they will file a report with Child Protective Services claiming I am a neglectful mother. They threatened that Emma would be taken from me if I didn't cooperate. I don't know what to do. The house is all we have, but my daughter is more important than any property. September 28th. I tried to seek help at the school, but the principal said she can't get involved in personal problems. I looked for a lawyer, but he asked for money I don't have. I feel alone and desperate. September 30th. I decided to hide all the proof that Emma is my daughter. If they manage to separate us, at least one day she might find these things and know the truth. I will store documents, photos, and this explanation in the abandoned train where we used to play on weekends. It's the safest place I know. Emma's heart tightened as she realized how smart and forward-thinking her mother had been. Even in despair, Elizabeth had thought to protect the truth so that one day her daughter could discover it. October 6th. They came today. They brought a social worker and official papers. They claimed they received a report that I leave Emma alone at home and that I am unfit to care for her. It's a lie, but the woman said it was protocol to take the child temporarily while they investigate. Emma cried so much. I promised I would come get her soon. I didn't know it would be the last time I'd see her. The next entries were almost illegible. written with the shaky handwriting of someone in deep despair. October 5th. I went to Child Protective Services. They said they can't give me information about where Emma is because the case is under investigation. But what investigation? They haven't come here to check on anything. October 8th. I found out the social worker who took Emma doesn't even work for the government. She was an employee of a private company, hired by the men who want my house. How is this possible? October 12th. No one listens to me. Every place I go tells me I'm an unstable mother and that it's better for Emma to stay away from me. But I'm not unstable. They're the ones driving me crazy with despair. October 15th. I signed the sale papers. They promised to give Emma back to me if I did it. But now they say that since I abandoned my daughter, I lost the right to be a mother. It was all a lie. They just wanted my property. The last entries were even more desperate. October 20th. I lost the house. I lost my daughter. I lost my job. I don't know what to do anymore. If only I knew where Emma was. October 25th. A neighbor told me he saw Emma at the Municipal Children's Home Our Lady of Hope. I went there, but they wouldn't even let me see her. They said I'm an unstable mother, and my presence would be harmful to the child's adjustment. October 30th. I'll try again tomorrow, and the day after tomorrow, and every day until I can prove I'm a good mother and get my daughter back. After that entry, the pages were left blank. Emma held the diary to her chest, crying silently. Her mother had fought desperately for her, but the system had completely failed. Elizabeth was not a neglectful mother. She was a victim of a criminal scheme. "Emma," said Mrs. Margaret softly, "we need to leave here. It's getting late, and it's not safe to stay too long." But the girl didn't want to leave. She kept searching the room, finding a few more hidden things, drawings she had made for her mother, a homemade cloth doll, and an empty picture frame, probably where a photo of the two of them together used to be. In Elizabeth's room, she found more evidence hidden in unlikely places. Behind a loose baseboard, there was a copy of the house sale documents and the name of the buying company, Mitchell Construction and Development Associates, LLC. Along with the papers was a handwritten note with a lawyer's name, Mr. Richard Mitchell, Office 1247 Fifth Avenue. Mrs. Margaret helped Emma store all the evidence they found. It was too much to carry, so they left some things hidden in the compartment in the child's room and took only the most important documents. As they were quietly leaving the house, they heard voices approaching from the main street. They quickly hid behind a large tree in the backyard and saw two men in dark suits stopped in front of the house's main gate. "Are you sure nothing was left inside?" one of them asked. "Positive. The cleanup guys were very thorough, and on Monday, the demolition will take care of any remaining problems." "Better that way. That woman caused too much trouble. At least now we can proceed with the building project without further complications." "And the girl?" "What girl? Officially, there is no girl. The records show that Elizabeth Rose Harrison was single and childless." The two laughed coldly and walked away. Emma felt anger rising in her chest. They spoke of her mother and herself as if they were just obstacles to their business. Real people were suffering because of those men's greed. Mrs. Margaret and Emma waited until they were sure the men had left before returning to the neighbor's house. It was almost midnight when they sat down again in the cozy living room to analyze everything they had discovered. "Emma, this is very serious," said Mrs. Margaret, examining the documents. "These men committed several crimes: document forgery, bribery, embezzlement. But where is my mother now?" It was the only thing that really mattered to Emma. If they got what they wanted, why didn't she come back to get me? Mrs. Margaret shook her head sadly. "I don't know, my dear. Elizabeth disappeared completely after losing the house. I looked in hospitals, adult shelters, even at the medical examiner's office. Nothing." The girl felt a chill in her stomach upon hearing the acronym she knew meant the medical examiner's office, where people who had passed away were kept. "Do you think she—" "Don't think about that. Your mother was a strong woman. She might be somewhere else trying to save money to hire a lawyer, or she might have left the city to seek help from family." "What family? The diary doesn't mention any relatives." "That's true. Elizabeth never spoke of parents or siblings. I always thought it was strange, but I respected her privacy." Emma picked up the photographs again and studied them carefully. In one of the pictures, Elizabeth was with an older woman in front of a church. It could be a relative or just a friend, but it was worth investigating. "Mrs. Margaret, do you recognize this woman in the photo with my mother?" The lady took the photograph and put on her glasses to see better. "No. But wait. This church is Our Lady of Sorrows, right here in the neighborhood. Elizabeth went there every Sunday. Perhaps the priest or someone from the community knows this woman." It was a weak lead, but it was better than nothing. Emma decided that the next day she would go to the church to look for information. Maybe someone would know Elizabeth's whereabouts, or at least could confirm more details of her story. Mrs. Margaret prepared a sofa bed in the living room for Emma to sleep. The girl was physically and emotionally exhausted, but her mind wouldn't stop processing all the information she had discovered. Her entire life had been based on a carefully constructed lie. During the night, Emma woke up several times from nightmares where men in suits tore her from her mother's arms. In one of the dreams, she could hear Elizabeth screaming her name while being taken away. She woke up with her face wet with tears, determined not to give up until she found the complete truth. On Sunday morning, Mrs. Margaret prepared a hearty breakfast and lent Emma a simple but clean dress to wear to church. The girl carefully tucked some photographs into her pocket and headed to the Church of Our Lady of Sorrows. The 9 o'clock Mass was packed with local community parishioners. Emma sat in the last pew and watched the people attentively, trying to recognize the woman from the photograph. She had no luck during the service, but decided to wait until the end to talk to the priest. Father Michael was a man of about 60, with graying hair and kind eyes. When Emma approached him after Mass, he greeted her with a warm smile. "Hello, my child. I don't remember seeing you here before. Are you new to the parish?" "Actually, Father, I wanted to ask about a person who used to attend here, a woman named Elizabeth Rose Harrison." The priest's expression changed immediately, becoming worried and sad. "Elizabeth? I haven't heard that name in a long time. Why are you asking about her?" "Because—" Emma hesitated, not knowing how much she could reveal. "Because she is my mother." Father Michael stopped what he was doing completely and looked at the girl carefully. "Your mother? But Elizabeth told me that—" "Wait, let me get a good look at you." He knelt down to be at Emma's eye level and studied her face carefully. "My God, you look just like her when she was young. You are the daughter who disappeared." "I didn't disappear, Father. They took me from her." The priest stood up slowly, clearly shocked. "Come with me. Let's talk in my office. This is a conversation that cannot happen in public." The priest's small office was at the back of the church and was full of religious books and parish documents. He offered a chair to Emma and sat across from her, still processing the information. "Elizabeth came here every week for years, always with a little girl, who she said was her whole life. When you stopped appearing, I asked the neighbors and they told me she had given up her daughter for adoption because she couldn't manage alone." "That's a lie," Emma practically shouted. "She never gave me up. Bad men took me from her to steal our house." Father Michael raised his hands in a calming gesture. "My child, I believe you. Elizabeth was not the type of woman who would abandon a child. She was completely devoted to your education and well-being." "Then why did you believe the abandonment story?" "Because that's what I was told, and I had no reason to doubt it. But now, looking at you, truly Elizabeth would never do such a thing." The priest sighed deeply. "Do you know where she is now?" "No, that's what I'm trying to find out. I found this photo of her with a woman here at the church." Emma showed the photograph. "Do you know this person?" The priest took the photo and smiled slightly. "Of course I know her. That's Sister Catherine, who works at Metropolitan General Hospital as a social worker. She and Elizabeth became friends because they both cared for children in difficult situations." Finally, a concrete lead. "Where can I find this Sister Catherine?" "She works in the pediatric ward of the hospital during the week, but—" The priest hesitated. "Emma, you need to understand this situation is very complex. If what you're saying really happened, powerful people have committed serious crimes. It could be dangerous to investigate alone. I can't stop now, Father. My mother suffered for 6 years because of me. I need to find her and prove the truth." Father Michael was silent for a few moments, clearly torn between protecting Emma and helping her. "If you are determined to continue, at least let me help. I've known Sister Catherine for many years. I can call her and explain the situation." "You would do that?" "Of course. Elizabeth was always a special person in this community. If she was the victim of an injustice, it is our duty to help correct it." The priest called the hospital and managed to speak directly with Sister Catherine. Emma only heard one side of the conversation, but could tell from the priest's reaction that there was some important development. "She wants to speak with you in person," he said after hanging up. "She can meet us at the hospital later today, but she asked you to bring all the evidence you've found. Dear listener, if you are enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. Mrs. Margaret insisted on accompanying Emma to Metropolitan General Hospital. The two arrived at the pediatric ward in the mid-afternoon, carrying a bag with all the documents, photographs and the diary found in the abandoned house. Sister Catherine was a woman of about 50, with greying hair tied in a simple bun and penetrating blue eyes. She received Emma and Mrs. Margaret in a small room reserved for family conversations, away from the hospital bustle. "When Father Michael called me, I thought it was some mistake," said Sister Catherine, observing Emma's face intently. "But seeing you in person, there's no doubt. You are Elizabeth's daughter." "Do you know where she is?" Emma asked anxiously. Sister Catherine sighed deeply and sat across from Emma, taking her small hands in hers. "My child, what I'm about to tell you won't be easy to hear. Elizabeth went through very difficult times after you were separated. Please tell me everything. I need to know the truth. After they took you from her, Elizabeth sought help everywhere she could. She came here to the hospital several times, asking me to use my contacts in the social welfare system to locate you. And did you succeed, sister? I tried, but there was something very strange about the documents in your case. Normally, when a child is removed from a family, there is a detailed process with several stages of investigation and opportunities for the parents to defend themselves. In your case, it seemed everything was done in a rushed manner, without the standard procedures. Sister Catherine took a file from a drawer and placed it on the table. I kept copies of everything I managed to investigate at the time. Elizabeth authorized me to seek information on her behalf. The documents showed a completely different version of the story Emma knew. According to the official records, Elizabeth had approached Child Protective Services herself, claiming she could no longer care for her daughter due to financial and emotional problems. "But that's a lie," Emma exclaimed. "She would never do that." "I know, my child. Elizabeth showed me evidence that someone had forged her signature on those documents. But when we tried to officially contest it, we discovered the process had already been concluded, and you had been placed in state custody." "How is that possible? Didn't they investigate if the signature was genuine?" Sister Catherine shook her head sadly. "The system was overloaded, as always. Cases like yours moved quickly through the procedures because they appeared to be voluntary abandonment by the mother. No one questioned the authenticity of the documents." Mrs. Margaret, who had remained silent until then, asked, "And then, what happened when you tried to reverse the situation?" "Elizabeth hired a lawyer with the little money she had, but we discovered the lawyer was being pressured not to pursue the case. He returned her money and said he couldn't help. Pressured by whom? We never found out for sure, but Elizabeth began to suspect there were influential people behind it all. She did her own investigation and discovered connections between those responsible for your removal and a real estate company interested in her house." Emma showed the documents found in the abandoned house. Sister Catherine examined everything carefully and confirmed it matched what Elizabeth had discovered. "Mitchell Construction and Development Associates," she read aloud. "Elizabeth told me about this company. They used questionable methods to acquire properties in neighborhoods that were being gentrified." "Questionable methods like what?" "They pressured vulnerable families to sell for low prices. If a family resisted, they created problems to force a sale. In Elizabeth's case, they used you as a form of blackmail." The story was becoming clearer and more infuriating. Emma asked the question that worried her the most. "Sister Catherine, where is my mother now?" The woman hesitated visibly before answering. "Elizabeth came here for the last time about 3 years ago. She was very different. Thin, looking like she hadn't slept in weeks, speaking in a confused manner." "Confused how?" "Sometimes she said things that made sense, but then she would start repeating the same phrase over and over, or just stare into space. I was very worried and suggested she seek medical help." "And did she seek it?" "I don't know. That was the last time I saw her. But—" Sister Catherine hesitated again. "A few weeks later, a colleague of mine who works in another department at the hospital told me that a woman by the name of Elizabeth Harrison had been admitted to the psychiatric emergency room." Emma's heart stopped for a moment. "Psychiatric emergency? Calm down, my dear. That doesn't necessarily mean anything serious. Sometimes people under extreme stress need temporary medical help." "But didn't you try to visit her?" "I did try, but when I got there, they told me there was no Elizabeth Harrison admitted. Either the records were confused or she was registered under another name," Mrs. Margaret completed. "Exactly. It's a common practice in cases where the person might be in danger or when the family prefers to maintain privacy." Emma felt a mixture of relief and despair. Her mother could be alive, but hospitalized in a psychiatric clinic for 3 years. If Elizabeth had developed mental problems because of all the trauma, would it be possible for her to recover her health? "Sister Catherine, can you help me find where my mother is hospitalized?" "I can try, but it will be difficult. Psychiatric records are very protected for privacy reasons, also if she is using another name." "Please," Emma begged. "She's the only family I have. I need to find her." Sister Catherine looked at the girl and then at Mrs. Margaret, clearly torn between the desire to help and the awareness of the legal difficulties involved. "I will make some discreet calls to colleagues who work at other hospitals and clinics in the city, but this may take a few days. I'll wait as long as necessary." In the meantime, Sister Catherine opened a drawer and took out a business card. "I want you to contact this person. She is a lawyer specializing in human rights who works on pro bono cases, meaning without charging fees for families in need." The card read, "Attorney Sarah Thompson, Family Law and Rights Advocacy." It was exactly the kind of help Emma needed, someone who could legally fight for her reunification with her mother. Attorney Sarah has helped several families in similar situations. If there is a legal way to resolve your situation, she will find it. Mrs. Margaret took the card and promised to call the lawyer the next morning. Before they left the hospital, Sister Catherine made an important observation. "Emma, I want you to understand that your mother may be very changed when you reunite. 3 years of hospitalization, especially under stressful conditions, can deeply affect a person. I don't care how she is, I just want to be with her again. I understand, but prepare yourself emotionally for the possibility that she will need time to recover fully." On the way back home, Emma and Mrs. Margaret talked about the next steps. They now had several lines of investigation: to seek the lawyer for legal matters, to wait for Sister Catherine to locate Elizabeth in the psychiatric clinics, and perhaps even to directly confront the company responsible for the whole situation. "Mrs. Margaret, do you think I should look for this Mitchell Construction and Development Associates?" "Alone? Absolutely not, my dear. Those people are dangerous. If they really did all this to you, they won't hesitate to harm a child who is threatening to expose them." "But what if they know exactly where my mother is? What if they can help me find her faster? Or they could make you disappear too." Mrs. Margaret stopped walking and held Emma's shoulders. "Listen carefully. We are not going near those people without proper legal protection. That's why we're going to see the attorney first." Back at Mrs. Margaret's house, the two organized all the evidence they had collected: the original photographs found in the train suitcase, Elizabeth's diary, the documents for the forced sale of the house, Sister Catherine's notes, and even the clothes Emma was wearing when she ran away from the children's home, as proof that she had truly lived at the institution. During the night, Emma had trouble sleeping again. Her mind wouldn't stop imagining what it would be like to reunite with Elizabeth. Would her mother still remember her? Would she be able to recognize the 4-year-old girl in the 10-year-old she had become? On Monday morning, Mrs. Margaret called attorney Sarah Thompson's office and managed to schedule an appointment for that same afternoon. The attorney had become interested in the case just from hearing a summary over the phone. The office was in a small but organized room downtown. Attorney Sarah was a woman around 40, with black hair tied in a ponytail and prescription glasses. She received Emma and Mrs. Margaret with professional seriousness, but there was kindness in her eyes. "Emma, before we begin, I want you to know this could be a long and complicated process. But from what I was told on the phone, you and your mother were victims of serious crimes, and we will fight to see justice done." The girl told the whole story from the beginning, showing each piece of evidence she had collected. Attorney Sarah took detailed notes and periodically asked questions to clarify specific points. "This is one of the clearest cases of fraudulent appropriation I've ever seen," she said, after examining all the documents. "And using a child as a means of blackmail makes the crimes even more serious." "Attorney, how long might it take for me to reunite with my mother?" "That depends on several things. First, we need to locate her, then assess her mental health condition. If she was hospitalized unnecessarily or kept sedated for non-medical reasons, that is also a crime." Attorney Sarah picked up the phone and made a call. "I have contacts in the mental health system who can help us locate your mother faster than through normal channels." While the attorney spoke quietly on the phone, Emma looked out the office window and saw on the opposite sidewalk the same dark car she had seen the night before near Mrs. Margaret's house. Two men in suits were sitting in the front, watching the building where the attorney's office was located. "Attorney," Emma interrupted the call, "there are two strange men watching the building." Attorney Sarah discreetly approached the window and looked in the direction Emma indicated. Her expression became grave. "Did you come straight here from home?" "Yes," replied Mrs. Margaret. "Why?" "Because it might mean someone is following you, or that information about you investigating the case has leaked." The attorney picked up the phone again and made a quick call. "Hello, building security. This is Attorney Sarah, room 1204. There's a suspicious vehicle parked in front of the building. Yes. Could you check, please?" A few minutes later, they saw a building security guard approach the car. The two men quickly got out and entered the vehicle, speeding away. "Definitely suspicious," murmured Attorney Sarah. "Emma, this confirms we're dealing with something dangerous. I'm going to take some legal precautions before we proceed." "What kind of precautions?" "I will officially register this case with the State Bar Association and send copies of all the documents to trusted colleagues. If anything happens to us, other people will know to continue the investigation." The attorney also suggested that Emma and Mrs. Margaret stay in a safe place for a few days while the initial legal procedures were carried out. "I have a partner shelter that can take them in temporarily." "No," Emma said firmly. "I'm not going into hiding. I've already lost 6 years of my life because of these men. I want to face them." "Emma, you're a child. You can't face adult criminals on your own." "Then help me do this the right way, but I won't stop looking for my mother." Attorney Sarah Thompson smiled slightly for the first time since they had begun talking. "You have the same determination your mother showed in the letters you found. All right. We'll do this the right way, but safely." The attorney devised an action plan that included several simultaneous fronts: searching for Elizabeth in hospital records, a legal investigation against Mitchell Construction and Development Associates LLC, a review of the process of Emma's removal from her family, and legal protection for both of them during the investigations. First, we locate your mother. Then we focus on holding the guilty parties accountable. That same afternoon, Attorney Sarah managed to identify 3 private psychiatric clinics in the New York metropolitan area where a woman matching Elizabeth's description had been admitted in recent years. Each would require a different legal approach to access the records. The good news is, I have a court order to investigate possible forced or unnecessary commitment. The bad news is this might alert the people involved in the scheme that we're close to the truth. "I don't care," said Emma. "They already know we're investigating anyway." The first clinic they visited was in the city's west side. It was an expensive and well-kept place, clearly intended for high-income patients. The medical director received Attorney Sarah in her office and confirmed that there was indeed a patient matching Elizabeth's description. "She has been with us for 2.5 years," said Dr. Jennifer Collins. She arrived in a state of extreme agitation with symptoms of persecution and paranoia. She constantly spoke about a daughter who had been kidnapped. Emma's heart raced upon hearing this. Does she still talk about it? No. Medical treatment has stabilized the symptoms. Currently she is calm and cooperative, but with impaired memory of the events that caused the initial trauma. Can I see her? Emma asked anxiously. Dr. Jennifer hesitated. It's a delicate situation. The patient was committed at the request of people who assumed responsibility for the treatment costs. They were clear that she should not receive visits that might reactivate her delusions. What people? Asked Attorney Sarah. A lawyer representing, well, I can't give specific details about who pays for the treatment. Medical confidentiality. Dr. Jennifer, Attorney Sarah adopted a more formal tone, I have here a court order to investigate possible irregular commitment. If this patient is Elizabeth Rose Harrison, and if she was committed against her will or kept here unnecessarily, that constitutes the crime of false imprisonment. The director became visibly nervous. All procedures followed legal protocols. We have complete documentation. Then there will be no problem showing us that documentation and allowing the patient's possible daughter to visit her, correct? After a few minutes of hesitation and consultations with other doctors, Dr. Jennifer agreed to take Emma to see the patient. But any sign of agitation or stress, and the visit will be terminated immediately. They walked through white, silent hallways until they reached a residential area of the clinic. The rooms looked more like small apartments than hospital cells. Dr. Jennifer stopped in front of room number 237. She's inside, but I want to warn you, the medication has affected her personality and memory. She may not react as you expect. When the door opened, Emma saw a thin woman sitting in an armchair by the window, looking out at the garden. Her hair, which in photographs was long and shiny, was now short and grey. She seemed to have aged far more than the 6 years since their separation. Elizabeth, Dr. Jennifer said softly, you have visitors. The woman turned slowly and looked at Emma without expression. There was no recognition in her eyes, only a vague curiosity. Emma felt her heart break as she realized her mother did not recognize her. Hello, Elizabeth said in a low, monotone voice. You're a very pretty girl. Have you come to visit someone here? Emma approached slowly, tears beginning to stream down her face. Hi, Mama. It's me, Emma, your daughter. Elizabeth tilted her head slightly, as if trying to remember something very distant. Emma. I knew an Emma once, but she was tiny, not a big girl like you. I grew up, Mama. I grew up away from you, but now I'm back. I came to get you. Get me? Elizabeth smiled vaguely. That's kind, but I live here now. The doctors take good care of me. I took the medicine and got better. Emma looked at Attorney Sarah, who gestured discreetly for her to keep trying. Mama, do you remember our house on Azalea Street? The garden with flowers we took care of together? A shadow passed over Elizabeth's face as if a painful memory was trying to surface. Azaleas? I liked azaleas, but I don't remember a house. And our playtime on the abandoned train? You used to take me there on weekends. This time the reaction was stronger. Elizabeth brought her hands to her head and began to rock slightly. Train? No. The doctors said not to think about the train. It's bad for my head. Dr. Jennifer immediately intervened. I think it's best to stop here. She's getting agitated. Just a little longer, please, Emma begged. Elizabeth, she said, kneeling beside her mother's chair, I have something that's yours. She took from her pocket the photograph of the two of them she had found in the suitcase. Look. Elizabeth took the photograph with trembling hands and studied it for a long moment. Gradually her expression began to change. The confusion gave way to surprise and then to slow but certain recognition. This is my daughter, my little Emma. She looked from the photograph to Emma and back to the photograph. But how? You grew up. You've become beautiful. Mama, Emma grasped Elizabeth's hands. I never stopped loving you. I never stopped looking for you. Elizabeth began to cry silently, still holding the photograph. They told me that you didn't want to see me anymore, that it was better for me to forget Who said that, Mama? The doctors, Dr. William. He said it was too painful for me to remember, that the medicine would help me forget the sadness. Attorney Sarah mentally noted the doctor's name. Using medication to erase traumatic memories without proper patient consent was a serious ethical violation. Mama, they lied to you. I never wanted to forget you. I spent 5 years at the children's home waiting for you to come get me. 5 years, Elizabeth whispered. 5 years lost. Gradually, more memories seemed to be returning. Elizabeth remembered the house, the threats from the men, the desperate fight to get her daughter back. But there were huge gaps in her memory, especially about how she had ended up in the clinic. I remember being very sad and angry. And then someone brought me here. But I don't remember who or why. Dr. Jennifer was clearly uncomfortable with the direction the conversation was taking. I need to interrupt here. The patient is becoming very emotional. No, please! Elizabeth grabbed the doctor's arm. This is my real daughter. It's not a delusion, she's really here. Elizabeth, you need to calm down. I'll have to administer a sedative if you remain this agitated. Don't give me medicine. Elizabeth rose from the armchair, still holding Emma's hand. I don't want any more medicine. I want to remember my daughter. The situation was getting tense. Dr. Jennifer called 2 nurses, clearly preparing to sedate Elizabeth by force if necessary. Dr. Jennifer, Attorney Sarah intervened. By the authority of the court order I carry, I demand that no medication be administered to this patient without my legal supervision. You have no medical authority here, but I have the legal authority to investigate abuse and improper medication. While the 2 attorneys argued, Elizabeth whispered to Emma, My daughter, they're going to give me medicine and I'll forget you again. I need to get out of here. We're going to get you out of here, Mama. I promise. But until then, hide this. Elizabeth discreetly handed Emma a small key she had taken from under the mattress. It's for the locker in my old room at the clinic where I was before. There might be important things there. Which clinic? Clinic. St. Benedict Clinic, in Queens. They brought me from there to here because I was causing problems. Before Emma could ask for more details, the nurses approached with a syringe. Attorney Sarah quickly intervened again. Any medication administered without judicial authorization will be considered assault. Do you really want to take that legal risk? The nurses looked at Dr. Jennifer, who was clearly in a difficult position. If they sedated Elizabeth against the attorney's order, they could face serious legal consequences. But if they didn't, Elizabeth might continue remembering things that someone clearly wanted her to forget. Very well, said Dr. Jennifer finally. But Elizabeth goes back to her room now, and any future visits must be scheduled with at least 48 hours' notice. Mama, Emma hugged Elizabeth quickly. I'll be back soon. Don't give up on yourself. I'll never give up again, Elizabeth replied, hugging her daughter tightly. Now that I've remembered you, I'll never let them make me forget again. When they left the clinic, Attorney Sarah was visibly disturbed. Emma, what we saw there is very serious. Your mother is clearly being medicated to suppress memories, not to treat any real mental illness. The key she gave me is our next stop. We're going to St. Benedict Clinic immediately. On the way, Attorney Sarah explained the legal aspects of the situation. If we can prove that Elizabeth was involuntarily committed or kept sedated unnecessarily, the people responsible could face criminal charges of false imprisonment, assault, and even torture. St. Benedict Clinic was very different from the first one, older with a more hospital-like appearance than residential. The administrative director, Mr. David Anderson, received them in his cramped, paper-filled office. Elizabeth Harrison, yes, she was with us for a few months, but she was transferred when her sponsor decided she needed more specialized care. Sponsor? Asked Attorney Sarah. The person or institution responsible for the treatment costs. In her case, it was a law firm handling her legal affairs. May I see the room where she stayed? Mr. David hesitated. Normally we don't allow that, but if you have a court order... Elizabeth's room at St. Benedict Clinic was much smaller and more Spartan than at the current clinic. There was only a bed, a small desk and a metal locker. Emma used the key Elizabeth had given her and opened the locker. Inside were some personal belongings that Elizabeth had managed to hide from the staff, more family photographs, handwritten notes on scraps of paper, and most importantly, a recording on a small voice recorder. Elizabeth managed to record conversations, said attorney Sarah Thompson, examining the device. This could be crucial evidence. They listened to the recording right there. Elizabeth's voice, stronger than they had found her, narrated events from the first months of her hospitalization. Day 15. Dr. William came again today. He said if I stop fantasizing about my daughter, I can have better privileges. But she's not a fantasy. Emma exists. She is real. Day 18. They increased my medication because I said I wanted to look for my daughter when I get out of here. The nurse said it's for my own good. Day 22. I managed to overhear a conversation in the hallway. Dr. Williams spoke with a man about continuing the treatment as long as necessary, and that the client was paying well to ensure full cooperation. The recording was clear evidence that Elizabeth was being kept sedated not out of medical necessity, but because someone was paying for it. It was exactly the kind of proof attorney Sarah Thompson needed to build a solid legal case. Emma, with this we can not only get your mother out of the clinic immediately, but also criminally prosecute everyone involved. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. The next morning, attorney Sarah Thompson filed a habeas corpus petition to secure Elizabeth's immediate release from the clinic. Simultaneously, she filed criminal complaints against Mitchell Construction and Development Associates LLC, against the doctors involved, and against all the public officials who facilitated the irregular separation of Emma from her mother. The judge reviewing the case, Judge Daniel Stevens, was shocked by the evidence presented. In his decision, he wrote that this was one of the most serious violations of family and human rights he had seen in his career. Elizabeth was released from the clinic that same afternoon. When Emma saw her again, her mother seemed more lucid and present, as if stopping the antidepressant medication was allowing her true mind to gradually emerge. "My daughter," Elizabeth hugged Emma at the clinic door. "I promise we will never be separated again." "I promise too, Mama." Mrs. Margaret offered her home for Elizabeth to stay in while she recovered physically and emotionally from the prolonged hospitalization. The first week was difficult. Elizabeth sometimes got confused or couldn't remember recent events. But with each day, more memories returned, and her natural personality resurfaced. "It's as if she's waking from a very long dream," observed Mrs. Margaret. During Elizabeth's recovery process, the criminal investigations advanced rapidly. The Detective Bureau found extensive evidence of the scheme run by Mitchell Construction and Development Associates LLC, which included bribing public officials, document forgery, and even blackmail using children as Elizabeth had suffered. Richard Mitchell, the lawyer and owner of the construction company, was arrested along with 2 partners and several involved public officials. During interrogations, he admitted that the scheme had been operating for over 10 years and had victimized dozens of families. They specifically chose single mothers because they knew it would be harder for these women to defend themselves alone, the detective in charge of the case explained to attorney Sarah Thompson. Elizabeth was essential in identifying other victims of the scheme. Even with her compromised memory, she remembered several other women she had met in the clinics who seemed to be in similar situations. There was a lady, Mrs. Mary, who spoke of 3 children who had been taken from her because she didn't have the means. But she seemed normal, just very sad. The investigations located Mrs. Mary and 4 other women who had been victimized by the same scheme. All had lost valuable properties in exchange for false allegations of child neglect. Some had been institutionalized for over 5 years. The case gained national attention when journalists uncovered the extent of the scheme. Television programs and newspapers began investigating whether similar operations existed in other cities across the country. Emma and Elizabeth were invited to give interviews, but attorney Sarah Thompson recommended they maintain their privacy until all legal proceedings were concluded. "You've already suffered enough from unwanted exposure." While awaiting the trial of those responsible, Elizabeth slowly began to rebuild her life. Her first priority was to reconnect with Emma and establish a normal family routine. "Sometimes I look at you and can't believe my little baby turned into this beautiful, intelligent girl," Elizabeth said one night, combing her daughter's hair. "And I can't believe I found you, Mama. There were times I thought it would never happen." Mrs. Margaret became like a grandmother to both, offering not only shelter, but the love and stability they needed during their recovery period. "This house was empty for a long time. You brought life back to it." The original house on Azalea Street had to be legally returned to Elizabeth, but it had been so damaged it would need extensive renovations. The family decided to sell the property and use the money to buy a smaller but better-kept house near Mrs. Margaret. "I don't need the big house," said Elizabeth. "I just need a home where we can be together." The adjustment process was not without challenges. Elizabeth sometimes had panic attacks when she saw men in suits on the street, remembering the threats she had received. Emma also showed signs of trauma, especially difficulty trusting authorities. Attorney Sarah Thompson recommended family therapy to help them process the trauma. "You went through extremely difficult events. It's natural that you need professional help to fully recover." The therapist, Dr. Ann Roberts, worked specifically with families who had been separated by the system. She helped Elizabeth and Emma understand that the feelings of anger, fear, and sadness they felt were normal reactions to real injustices. "The important thing is that you overcame. The truth was uncovered, and you are together again." During one therapy session, Elizabeth revealed how she had managed to hide evidence even while sedated at the clinic. "I knew something was wrong with me, that my thoughts weren't natural, so I forced myself to stay awake and hide things when the nurses weren't looking. I knew that if my mind ever returned to normal, I would need proof." Emma was impressed by her mother's willpower even in the worst circumstances. "You never gave up on me, did you?" "Never. And I never will. Even when I couldn't quite remember your face, I knew deep in my heart that I had a daughter somewhere who needed me." The trial of Richard Mitchell and his associates took place 6 months after Elizabeth and Emma were reunited. The proceedings lasted 3 weeks and revealed shocking details about the extent of the criminal scheme. During her testimony, Elizabeth showed surprising strength by confronting Richard Mitchell directly in court. "You destroyed 6 years of my life with my daughter, 6 years that will never come back. And he did it just for money." Richard Mitchell, who during the scheme seemed all-powerful, in the courtroom was just a middle-aged man trying to avoid prison. "I regret that it got out of hand. The goal wasn't to harm the families. The goal was to steal our homes," Emma interrupted, also testifying in court. "You used children as weapons against their own mothers." Judge Daniel Stevens sentenced Richard Mitchell to 12 years in prison for forming a criminal organization, aggravated fraud, false imprisonment, and active corruption. His associates received lesser but significant sentences. More important than the prison terms were the systematic changes the case brought about. The state Supreme Court implemented new protocols to prevent the irregular removal of children from families, including cross-checks and mandatory appeal periods. Elizabeth decided to use her experience to help other families in similar situations. Together with attorney Sarah Thompson, she created an organization to offer free legal support to parents facing irregular separation from their children. If our pain can prevent other families from going through the same thing, then the fight was worth it. Emma, now 11 years old, returned to school regularly for the first time in years. She had missed a lot of academic content during the years of instability, but she was a dedicated student and quickly caught up. "She has a determination I've never seen in another child," commented her new teacher, Ms. Jennifer. "It's as if nothing could discourage her." During one of the school meetings, Emma presented a project on children's rights based on her own experience. Her presentation was so impactful that the school decided to implement an educational program on the topic. "Many children don't know they have the right to question when adults do things that seem wrong," Emma told her classmates. "I learned that we should always fight for the truth, even when it seems impossible." On the first anniversary of their reunion, Elizabeth and Emma visited the abandoned train where it all began. The place remained the same, but now it had a completely different meaning. "Thank you for keeping our secrets," Emma said to the empty car. touching the spot where she had found the suitcase that changed her life. Elizabeth hugged her daughter as they watched the sunrise through the train's broken windows. "You know what I learned from all this? That the truth always finds a way. It might take time, it might be hard, but it always does. And that a mother's love is stronger than any lie," Emma added. The two walked back home hand in hand, knowing they had not only recovered each other, but also helped create a slightly safer world for other families. The abandoned train was left behind, but the lessons it had guarded for years would be with them forever. Elizabeth and Emma's new home was just 3 blocks from Mrs. Margaret's house, who remained a constant presence in their lives. The elderly woman had officially become the grandmother Emma never had. "Family isn't just blood," Mrs. Margaret always said. "Family is who stands by your side in difficult times." Elizabeth slowly resumed her career as a teacher, starting with private tutoring for children with learning difficulties. Her personal experience made her especially sensitive to the needs of students who had been through trauma. "Children who have suffered are more distrustful, but also more determined," she explained to other teachers. "They just need someone to believe in them." One of Elizabeth's first students was an 8-year-old boy who had been taken from his parents and later returned after it was discovered the accusations were false. "Aunt Elizabeth understands what happened to me," he told his mother. "She went through that too." Emma decided that when she grew up, she wanted to be a lawyer like attorney Sarah Thompson. "I want to help other families like she helped us." To that end, she dedicated herself even more to her studies and participated in all the activities of the organization Elizabeth had created. Even as a child, her story inspired other young people in difficult situations. When Emma tells her story, the other children understand they are not alone, observed Dr. Ann Roberts, the therapist who continued to support the family. 2 years after the reunion, Elizabeth and Emma participated in a national conference on family rights in Washington, D.C. They were invited to share their experience with judges, lawyers, and social workers from across the country. "The system failed us because the people involved did not properly verify the facts," Elizabeth said during her presentation, "but the system also saved us when ethical professionals, like attorney Sarah Thompson, fought for justice." The conference resulted in new national guidelines for cases involving the removal of children from families, including mandatory verification by multiple authorities and the right to appeal at every stage of the process. During the trip to Washington, D.C., Elizabeth and Emma visited the Capitol and met with congresspeople who were proposing stricter laws against schemes like the one they had faced. "You have turned a personal tragedy into positive change for thousands of families," said Congresswoman Claire Williams, who was championing the bill. "That is true resilience." Back in New York, Elizabeth and Emma's lives had found a healthy and happy rhythm. Elizabeth worked at a private school where she was highly respected, and Emma was among the top students in her class. On weekends, the two enjoyed cooking together, reclaiming family traditions that had been interrupted during the years of separation. Elizabeth taught Emma how to make the famous chocolate cake she used to bake when her daughter was little. "I remembered the smell, but I couldn't identify what it was," Emma said the first time they made the cake together again. "Now I know it was missing you." Mrs. Margaret was always the first to taste the cakes, keeping up the tradition that had started years before in the house on Azalea Street. "You brought back a recipe, but mostly you brought back the joy," she would say. The organization created by Elizabeth grew significantly and began handling cases in several cities across the state. Sister Catherine became one of the main collaborators, using her hospital experience to identify potential cases of improper hospitalization. "What you started is saving families every month," Sister Catherine reported during a meeting. "Just in the last 6 months, we helped reunite 15 families that had been separated improperly." Father Michael also remained involved, offering spiritual and emotional support to the families served by the organization. His church became a meeting point for support groups, where parents and children who had gone through difficult separations could share experiences. "Your faith has taught me that miracles happen when people don't give up fighting for the truth," he said during a special celebration for the 3-year anniversary of Elizabeth and Emma's reunion. Richard Mitchell and his associates remained in prison, but the impact of their actions would reverberate for many years. Several of the properties they had stolen were returned to the rightful families, and a compensation fund was created to help with the victims' recovery costs. "Money will never give back the lost years," said Elizabeth, "but at least it ensures other families have the resources needed to fight similar injustices." One of the most shocking discoveries of the investigations was that the scheme had operated in at least 5 U.S. states, victimizing hundreds of families over 15 years. Emma was amazed to realize that her courage in fleeing the children's home had eventually exposed one of the largest family corruption schemes in the country's history. "Sometimes one small person can make a very big difference," said attorney Sarah Thompson during one of the interviews about the case. Emma proved that age doesn't determine impact. The story of Elizabeth and Emma was turned into a book by an investigative journalist, with all proceeds going to the organization they had founded. The book became a bestseller and was translated into several languages, inspiring legal changes in other countries. "Our story isn't unique," Elizabeth always emphasized in interviews. "Unfortunately, there are many families going through similar situations. We hope our experience inspires others to never give up the fight for truth and justice." During one of the book presentations, a woman in the audience stood up and said, "My daughter disappeared 2 years ago under similar circumstances. I was ready to give up, but your story gave me hope again." This reaction repeated in several cities where Elizabeth and Emma shared their story. Dozens of families sought help from the organization after hearing their experiences, and many were able to reunite after years of separation. "The most rewarding thing," said Emma during an interview on her 15th birthday, "is knowing that our pain served to prevent other families from going through the same." Elizabeth, now 42 and fully recovered from the effects of the forced medication, had become one of the country's leading family rights advocates. Her lectures were requested at universities, courts, and international conferences. "The experience taught me that our child protection system, though well-intentioned, has vulnerabilities that can be exploited by people with bad intentions," she explained in her presentations. "We need more checks, more transparency, and more opportunities for appeal." Emma, now a confident and articulate teenager, divided her time between studies and volunteer work at the organization. She had developed a special ability to talk with children who had been removed from their families and help them express their feelings and experiences. "Children trust me because they know I went through the same thing they did," Emma explained. "They don't need to pretend everything is okay with me." The house where Elizabeth and Emma lived had become a true home, full of photographs of the reunited family, well-tended plants, and the constant movement of people visiting to talk about their own difficult cases. "Your house has become a safe harbor for families in crisis," observed Mrs. Margaret, who at 76 remained a constant presence in both their lives. "You've transformed suffering into service to others." The kitchen was always the center of gatherings, where Elizabeth prepared coffee and cakes for families coming to seek guidance. Emma liked to help by serving and listening to the stories, always ready to offer encouragement based on her own experience. "Never let anyone convince you that you're imagining things," she always told other children. "If something feels wrong, it probably is wrong. Trust your instincts." The abandoned train where Emma had found the evidence that changed her life was eventually restored by the city and turned into a memorial for families who had been unjustly separated. A special plaque honored all the families who never stopped fighting for truth and love. Elizabeth and Emma often brought visitors to the memorial, using it as a visual way to explain their story. "This place represents hope," Elizabeth would always say. "It shows that even in the most unlikely places, the truth can be waiting to be discovered." The car where Emma had found the suitcase was preserved exactly as it was, including the secret compartment in the floor where Elizabeth had hidden the evidence. Children visiting the memorial often left their own letters and drawings in the compartment, creating a spontaneous tradition of hope. "It's moving to see how our story inspires other people not to give up," said Emma during a special ceremony on the memorial's 5th anniversary. "Every letter left here represents a family that decided to keep fighting." The organization, founded by Elizabeth, had grown so much that it needed to open offices in other cities. Attorney Sarah became the national legal coordinator, overseeing a network of volunteer lawyers specializing in cases of irregular family separation. "What started as one family's fight has become a national movement," said attorney Sarah during a television interview. "Elizabeth and Emma proved that ordinary people can create extraordinary change when they refuse to accept injustice." Sister Catherine had specialized further in identifying cases of irregular psychiatric commitment, helping dozens of people escape situations similar to what Elizabeth had faced. Her work at Metropolitan General Hospital became a national reference for identifying medical abuse. "Elizabeth taught me that we must always question when a patient seems to be medicated to forget rather than to cure," she explained in her medical presentations. "The difference can be subtle, but it's crucial." Father Michael continued offering spiritual support not only to Elizabeth and Emma, but to all the families served by the organization. His church had become a sanctuary for people facing difficult legal battles. "The faith of these families has taught me that God works through courageous people who refuse to accept injustice," he said during his homilies. "Elizabeth and Emma are living examples of how love can overcome any obstacle." Mrs. Margaret, despite her advanced age, remained active in the organization, offering practical and emotional support to newly reunified families. Her home continued to be a reference point for anyone needing a safe place during difficult legal processes. "At 80 years old," she said proudly, "I've finally found my true purpose, helping families stay together." The story of Elizabeth and Emma had transcended their personal experiences to become a national symbol of resistance and hope. Schools used their case to teach about civil rights and individual courage. Law schools included their legal process as a mandatory case study. "The most important thing is not that our story had a happy ending," reflected Elizabeth during an international human rights conference, "but that our experience proved it's possible to challenge corrupt systems and win." Emma, now 17 and preparing to take her college entrance exams for law school, had decided to dedicate her career to continuing the work her mother had started. Her essays on social justice impressed teachers and classmates. "I want to be a voice for children going through today what I went through when I was little," she wrote in her college application essay. "My experience taught me that age should not be a barrier to fighting for justice." The relationship between Elizabeth and Emma had strengthened over the years, overcoming the initial traumas and becoming even deeper than before the separation. The two developed an almost telepathic communication and an absolute mutual trust. "Our forced separation, though painful, taught us to value every moment together," Elizabeth observed. "Now we know nothing should be taken for granted, especially the time we have with the people we love." During a special interview on the 10th anniversary of their reunion, the reporter asked if they felt anger toward the people who had caused so much suffering. Elizabeth's answer surprised many. "Anger is a natural and valid feeling," she said, "but we choose to use our energy to build something positive instead of feeding negative feelings. Our revenge was to transform our pain into strength to help other families." Emma added, "The people who harmed us lost their freedom and reputation, but we gained something far more valuable, a huge network of families who support each other and a fairer legal system for everyone." The organization they had created had already helped over 1,000 families reunite and had contributed to significant legal changes across the country. New protocols ensured that cases like theirs would be much harder to occur. "Our legacy is not just the families we helped directly," said attorney Sarah Thompson during an awards ceremony where Elizabeth received a national human rights honor, "but the thousands of future families who will never have to go through what you went through, because the system is stronger now." Richard Mitchell and his key associates remained imprisoned, serving long sentences that served as an example to others who might consider similar schemes. Ironically, some of them sought out Elizabeth years later to ask for forgiveness, but she chose not to meet them personally. "Forgiving does not mean forgetting or minimizing what they did," she explained. "It means choosing not to let their anger control my life. My focus is on building, not destroying." The house on Azalea Street, which had been the center of the entire tragedy, was eventually transformed into a community center for families in crisis. Elizabeth and Emma participated in the opening ceremony, symbolically closing the cycle of pain and beginning a cycle of healing. It is fitting that this place, which represented so much suffering, is now a place of hope and rebuilding, Elizabeth said during the ceremony. Sometimes the darkest places can become beacons of light for others. Emma planted azaleas in the garden of the new community centre, the same flowers her mother had tended years before, so that future families know it's possible to bloom even after the harshest winter. The story of Elizabeth and Emma continued to inspire people around the world. Documentaries were produced, movies were scripted, and their talks were translated into dozens of languages. But for them, the most significant impact was always personal and individual. Every family we help is a victory against those who tried to destroy us, Elizabeth would say. Every child reunited with their parents is proof that love always finds a way. On their 15th reunion anniversary, Elizabeth and Emma organized a large celebration that brought together hundreds of families who had been helped by their organization. The event took place at the train memorial, transforming the place that had symbolized abandonment into a symbol of community and hope. 15 years ago, a brave little girl refused to accept that her story had ended, said attorney Sarah Thompson during her speech at the celebration. Today, hundreds of families are together because she decided to fight for the truth. Emma, now a young lawyer who graduated with honors, used the occasion to announce she had been accepted into an international master's program in human rights. I will take our story and our lessons to an even bigger stage. Elizabeth, at 50 years old, had decided to write a second book, this time focusing on practical strategies families could use to protect themselves from similar schemes. Information is our best defense against predators who take advantage of vulnerable families. The celebration included testimonies from several families who had been reunified through the organization. Each story was unique, but all shared common themes: persistence in the face of adversity, faith in justice, and the transformative power of family love. You taught us that no child is an orphan, as long as there is someone willing to fight for them, said Charles Anderson, father of 3 children who had been improperly removed and later reunified. Our family exists today because you proved it is possible to challenge the system and win. As the sun set over the train memorial, Elizabeth and Emma walked one last time through the car where it had all begun. The compartment that had hidden the suitcase was now filled with letters, drawings, and photographs left by visitors over the years. "Mama," said Emma, holding Elizabeth's hand, "do you think that scared 10-year-old girl imagined her escape would result in all this?" Elizabeth smiled, remembering the brave daughter who had refused to accept the official version of her story. "I think she knew she was fighting for something bigger than herself. I think she knew she was fighting for love." As they walked back home, passing Mrs. Margaret, who was waiting for them with a hot dinner, Elizabeth and Emma reflected on the extraordinary journey they had traveled together. From a traumatic separation was born a life mission that transcended their personal experiences. "You know what makes me proudest?" Elizabeth said as they approached home. "It's not that we managed to find each other again, though that is wonderful. It's that we used our experience to ensure other families don't go through what we did." Emma agreed, "and that we proved an ordinary person, even a child, can make a difference in the world when they refuse to accept injustice." They entered the house where Mrs. Margaret had prepared a special version of the chocolate cake that had become a family tradition, this time decorated with 15 candles representing the years of reunion. Around the table were photographs of dozens of reunified families, each representing a victory against injustice. 15 years, said Mrs. Margaret, now 85 but still vigorous. 15 years of families together because of the courage of you two. Elizabeth blew out the candles, making a silent wish for more families to find the strength to fight for their rights. Emma, at the same time, made her own wish to have the wisdom and courage to continue the work they had begun. That night, as they organized the gifts and letters received during the celebration, mother and daughter found a special letter from a 10-year-old child from Pennsylvania. "Dear Emma, my name is John and I am 10 years old, the same age you were when you ran away to the train. My mother disappeared 2 years ago and everyone tells me she abandoned me. But after reading your story, I'm going to look for the truth about what really happened. If you manage to find your mother, I can find mine too. Thank you for teaching me to never give up." Elizabeth and Emma looked at each other, knowing their journey was far from over. As long as there were children like John facing similar situations, they would continue fighting for truth and justice. "Tomorrow we'll call this boy," said Elizabeth, carefully putting away the letter. "And we'll help him find his mother," Emma added. They slept that night knowing they had transformed their greatest tragedy into the greatest victory of their lives. The orphaned girl who had fled to the abandoned train had found much more than a lost family. She had found a purpose that would last a lifetime. The abandoned train would remain a symbol of hope for future generations, reminding all who visited that sometimes the greatest discoveries are hidden in the most unlikely places, waiting for someone brave enough to seek the truth. And the truth, as Elizabeth always said, invariably finds a way to the light, no matter how long it has been buried in darkness. End of story. What an emotional story, isn't it? This journey of Emma and Elizabeth teaches us that true love never surrenders, even in the face of the greatest adversity. Now we want to know your opinion. Do you believe Emma made the right decisions by running away in search of the truth? How would you react in a situation like this? Share your reflections on this touching story with us in the comments. Don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other narratives that will move you.